Hello, Zane. We're gonna take a look at your 5 characteristics posting here. So let's go ahead and share screen. I believe I've got your posting queued up here. So share. All right. So as we normally do, just kind of take a quick browse and see how the overall posting looks. If you've got everything sort of posted correctly, all of the images that we're asking for, labels, that kind of stuff. Temperature, intensity, where it was up there, direction, contrast. We got all the images up there. You've got them formatted correctly. So everything looks pretty good in that way. The exposures or the manner in which the images have been taken, lights or darks, they look a little dark. You probably recognize that they're a little low in terms of intensity. They could be a bit brighter. You're taking photographs of dark objects in a dark room on a set, but really it doesn't have anything to do with the actual objects. It really has to do with how you are lighting the scene, and then what being able to get your camera to capture those things. We're exploring more of that in the aesthetics and control, so you'll probably get a bit better on that. Now, with the direction, of course, what we're looking for is quite simply at first just the understanding that as we move the light around the set, that we're going to be getting a different sort of emotive quality depending on where that light is. Now, first of all, the composition, this is really good. I remember kind of announcing to everyone, get in there close and put things very, right up onto the scene, whether they're in focus or not. This is good. You're doing that, and you can see what the advantage is. You're really kind of breaking up the space here. Again, the exposure is a little dark. I say a little bit because it's not so dark that it's kind of over the top. It's real low key, but I think you could have a little more luminosity going on here. So we have the number 2 because I can see the shadow going right in this direction. It kind of tells us a little bit about that. Now I see it changed direction. Now I see it changing direction this way. It looks like we skipped one, maybe. I don't know. No, it looks like you just kind of were off a little bit on that one. This is a really interesting, number position 4 and 6. I believe that's what it is. 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 and 6 are probably my most used that I use with the key light, because that is called short lighting, and this is what's called short lighting. What you've achieved here, and that is where the light is really just kind of caressing the scene itself and identifying shape just barely, and allowing the rest of the scene to kind of happen on its own. Now, later on, when we bring in the reflectors, you have a lot more possibility here, and it doesn't just kind of go off in the middle of nowhere. This is always ends up looking like Stonehenge, some sort of monolith. It just helps to demonstrate that, this one's a real tough one to work with, and you tend to want to avoid it most of the time unless you're trying to create that sort of heroic kind of feel. You can see immediately how that gets diffused once you turn it to the side, though. Again, looks like you're doing a pretty good job there. Your best compositions are when you're coming in closer. Your most effective use of the entire space is when you're using an object kind of right up in close, and then you're allowing other things to kind of fall away. That's where you're at your best. Otherwise, what happens is it starts to become a little bit too much about objects on a table rather than just shape and tone and texture and things. All right, let's go move into the intensity, which intensity simply adds another light to the set. Now you have choices as to where you want that key light to go, and here you're starting to do a much better job of getting that scene a little bit more lit. You can see it's a little brighter, so the intensity is helping you with the brightness there, and this one is a lot better. As far as that, you are avoiding, for the large part, what's called the butterfly effect, where you have 2 lights kind of coming in, and if they're too equal in intensity, or if they're spaced too equally apart from one another on either side, it creates this kind of symmetry of lighting, where you have a highlight and then a shadow in between, where there's no variation of the two. That's usually something that we're trying to avoid when it does happen. And it looks like you're avoiding that. This is quite lovely. I think that's probably why you made an image of that. This is really where you're making the photograph of. So when you start to identify that stuff, like when you start to see, oh man, it's just this area right in here, that's when you want to kind of get it a little bit closer yet to try to just really focus in on that so the audience has no misunderstanding as to what you want them to look at. There, you kind of modified it a little bit, which is, that's okay. I mean, I think we can do a pass on one image because here what you're doing is you're seeing how dramatically it changes just by scooching it over there. So, normally we want to do more variation here. However, just kind of exploring it there once that we can get away with that, but we don't want to repeat compositions that are that close too often. So we're going through and you're using it. Sometimes you're a little out of focus on some of these images, or your focus is shifted in a really sort of unusual place. Maybe you're seeing it, maybe you're not, but focus really does kind of play a part in it. And what I want you to do is make sure, one, that you're on manual focus, and then number two, determine that once you're set and you're looking at it, check to see, where am I focused? Because that does matter. That does tell the audience just where you want them to look. So that is another kind of important thing. You're doing a pretty good job so far. I mean, what you're doing, although some of the images, like I said, are got a little bit dark on you, I think it's starting to kind of come together. Now, we are getting a little bit of the background in focus, which we take care of that once we get into the aperture portion of the aesthetics and control. We do that depth of field, where it's shallow depth of field, and we no longer have that. This color one is usually where we introduce the bones, we start to get into some other things, and the compositions tend to pull back again because we see bones and we start to make photographs of bones again. So that's what this one looks like. Then we start to get a little closer and you start to kind of like dance around it a little bit. So, just because we move to the subjects and just because we're into this new thing, sometimes what happens is we forget, oh, wait a minute, I still want to treat these as objects. I still want to treat them as just tone, texture, value, that kind of stuff. I don't want to kind of throw in, lighting and then just kind of forget about the whole compositional element. Although you're doing a pretty good job of experimenting with lighting, really what we want to see here is the idea that you have a lot of different lighting options. You know where those controls are, and how can you juxtapose the settings on your camera with the lighting choices that you have in order to create some deliberately abstract and deliberately off sort of balanced lighting choices, some of which can look quite deliberate once you've got a hang of it. I mean, knowing how to do something like this tells you how you might be able to shoot a nighttime photography when it's not nighttime. This looks like it would be like in glowing in moonlight, but you know very well it wasn't shot under glowing moonlight. So there you go. It kind of gives you some identifying as to how certain effects are done. Then we get into some of the others with the contrast. That's where the reflector comes in. Much different than using that secondary light, because the reflector is really, it helps us to avoid that second shadow going in the opposite direction. That weird sort of dual shadows going in two directions, which is just, it doesn't exist. It's just wrong. We try to minimize that when we're using two lights by not having the ground showing and things like that. But here we don't have that problem. And so the reflection kind of comes back into it. We also don't have the issue of balance, because we know that no matter what we do, the reflection's never going to compete with the key, because the reflection is simply recycling leftover light from the key. The key is hitting the objects, and then whatever's left over sort of passes by. And then we come in there with the shadow, with the reflecting, and it bounces light back into the shadows. So we're capturing that sort of extra and throwing it back in. It's always going to be lower in value than the key, so we don't have to worry about balance. What we do kind of get into is just how much of it do we want to throw back in and where. That's where the control starts to come in. It can get a little tricky sometimes. It is almost absolutely necessary when we're working with things like reflective objects, silverware and glass and that kind of stuff. again, you know, this is an exploration of that. And here, kind of, I don't know if we kind of got it all the way. We could have used more of the reflection in here to illuminate a little bit more of this. Here, I think the exposure gets away from you. And again, here, I think the focus got away from you a little bit. Those viewfinders are so small, you really want to double check by either zooming in or just verifying, you know, after taking a few photographs, maybe go offload them or something. I actually use two things. I have these spectacles that I bought. They're just drugstore, like old man vision glasses, and they are like super like powered. I mean, they make me dizzy if I were to look up, but holy cow, they're like, you know, jeweler's glasses. Like I can look down and man, I can see everything. It's like magnified everything. Like I said, I cannot look up at something because it'll just make me sick because it's just all blurry. But if I really, really want to see intense detail, like super sharp, even it's magnified, I throw those on. I call them my focusing glasses. And I throw those things on, man, I'll know if something's in focus or not. You probably don't wear glasses, but something like that is a real help. So that's one. The other thing you could do for focus would be a larger screen. I have a laptop. I also will double check a lot of times when I'm making photographs. I have my laptop connected to the camera so that I can see exactly what I'm doing, not on the small screen, but on the laptop itself, so that I can verify what's happening. So those are a couple of ways you can double check on the focus. Yes, because your focus comes kind of goes away just a little bit on a few of these, which is unfortunate. You can never get focus back. Some of the other things you can correct, but focus, you can't really do much about that. Now we get into the diffusion. The diffusion is really where it starts to all come together. You're going to start to feel like a studio photograph now because diffusion, adding to extra lighting. Now we maybe, you know, I don't know that anybody was trying to use reflectors in here. I didn't encourage anybody to, but all of the components start to come together. And this is what studio lighting, this is what control is all about. These 5 components are all that you need in order to take the next steps forward into professional photography. The camera is next. Now you're ready. You have everything that you would need. It's just a matter of experience and refinement and experience and refinement after that. There isn't a whole lot more to do other than experience and refinement once you know the basics. The basics don't get any more complex. This is what they are with photography. That's all they have to be. You just have to keep practicing them, and you just have to get so facile with it, meaning they're so second nature to you. The numbers in the camera settings, the way that lighting works, how to make choices about what kind of subjects are in front of you. All of that becomes a language, just like speaking. You don't have to think about how to form the words, they just come out. You don't have to think about how to render an object, you just do it. So these are the things that through practice will start to come if photography is something you want to continue to explore. Very good. I mean, I think you're in a good place right now. You certainly have some things I think we can improve on, like the focus, and your exposure could get better, brightness a little bit more. But your compositions, you're exploring that. You get away from it every so often, but your compositions are usually pretty sound, save a few of them. So I think you're in a good spot. You may want to review a couple of them, and later on, if you have time, like maybe revisit a few. But overall, I think it's a pretty good project, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else you come up with in the studio. All right, bye-bye now.